طريقتنا الصحبة والخير في الجميع.
The sayings of our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, are known as hadith.
Hadisler, yani Kur'an ve hadis İslam'ın esasıdır.
The hadith, the sayings of our beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Holy Quran are the foundation of our belief.
Şimdiki ahir zaman insanları hadis yok diyor.
There are people now in the end times who deny the hadith, the sayings of our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and say they do not exist.
Kendilerini okumuş, İslam'ı okumuş.
And those who make such claims are the ones who consider themselves to be scholars, who have studied. They describe themselves as having studied the religion and see themselves in the position to make such statements. But it is Allah Almighty's wisdom that what we are seeing here is that as people study and claim to become scholars, they're alienating and distancing themselves more and more from Islam and faith.
İmandan uzaklaşıyor, İslam'dan da.
The further they are studying, the further they go away from faith, and the further they are away from faith, the further they are away from Islam.
Uzaklaşmış oluyor. Onlar kibire müptela olmuşlar.
They have become the victims of arrogance, pride, and haughtiness.
Kibir de şeytanın sıfatıdır.
Haughtiness, arrogance is a characteristic of the devil.
Şeytan hiçbir şeyi beğenmez.
Shaitan does not like anything.
Ben en yüksek benim diye.
He only likes himself and considers himself to be the highest.
İnsanoğlu nedir? Onlar topraktan, çamurdan yapılmış.
Shaitan, the devil, despises the human being and says this human being is just created out of mud, out of soil.
Ateşten yapılmışım, ben daha iyiyim diye.
Whereas I'm created out of fire and I'm better than them, Shaitan says.
O kibir sahibi şeytan gibi olur.
And those who are arrogant, those who are haughty, they follow Shaitan.
Bir şey çıkarmak ister. Halbuki sen okumuşsun, o kadar seneler harcamışsın. Zaten şimdiki bütün...
They study for such a long time, they spend so many times on their studies.
Okuyanlar çoğu bir şey anladıkları yok.
But while they study for such a long time, they do not understand what they study.
Bir diploma alalım diye uğraşıyorlar.
They study not for the sake of understanding, but for the sake of obtaining a diploma.
Hakiki yani anlayan çok azdır.
There are only a few who really understand and do not just study for the sake of graduating.
Okuduklarını anlayan çok azdır.
There are only a few who really understand what they study.
Bu cümle içinde de din okuyanlar.
And this holds true to those who study religion.
Allah muhafaza etsin. Okumasa galiba imanı daha kuvvetli olabilir.
And this is a very dangerous matter, that those who make religious studies, who study Islam, they do not understand what they study, and this then leads to them getting further away from their belief from Islam, and they would be closer to Islam and to faith if they had not studied.
Okudukça o fikirler öğreniyor, daha beter şeytan musallat oluyor.
As they study, Shaitan infiltrates them with his whisperings and brings in all kinds of ideas and opinions.
Ona kibri pompalıyor.
And he pumps arrogance and haughtiness into the veins of those who study Islam.
Ta ki imanını bitirsin diye.
And by means of this arrogance and haughtiness, Shaitan targets those who study Islam in order to destroy their faith.
Şimdi bu meselede büyük alimler bakıyorsun, bazen şaşırıp kalıyorsun.
And this applies to even renowned scholars, and one is surprised by what they say or how they behave.
Geçenlerde bir alim hani hadis diyor, Recep ayında hiçbir şey yok.
And recently there was a renowned scholar who was speaking about the hadiths, and he was mentioning that there's no such hadith regarding the holy month of Rajab.
Sahih değildir o hadisler.
And he described those narrations about the month of Rajab as not being truthful or not being reliable.
Sahih dedi ya doğru şey olarak, ama terim olarak, hadis olarak sahih demek kuvvetli hadistir. Yani.
And by based on terminology, what he means by what is meant by sahih there is that it's not a strong relation or not a reliable. It's not a strong narration.
Biraz sonra söylüyor işte böyle şu hadis var, bu hadis var. Ha bunlar kuvvetli değil.
And then while he was speaking, he then mentioned hadiths about the holy month of Rajab, and he said that these narrations they are not strong narrations.
Ya demek ki hadis varmış.
But while he speaks, he contradicts himself, because first he says there's no hadith on the holy month of Rajab, and then he says there are hadith on the holy month of Rajab, and now he says but they are not strong narrations.
Hadis var.
These hadiths do exist.
Ama sen başta insanları şaşırtmak için sahih değil, yani doğru değil, sahih, onların Arapçasında sahih demek doğru demek.
But by this discussion, he ignites conflict and turmoil among the believers and spreads discord by starting this discussion about what is a strong, what is a weak hadith, when he mentions whether something is sahih. And he makes this discussion on these sayings of our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, which do exist. And by starting this discussion about them being strong or weak, he just ignites discord and turmoil among the community.
Halbuki doğru hadis var ama tabii o kadar çok sahabe rivayet etmediği için o yani çok kuvvetli sayılmaz ama
it is a matter of fact that if it's a hadith, it is a saying of our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and it may be categorized, while it is still truthful, it may be still categorized as not being a strong hadith, because it has not been narrated as much as other hadiths through the companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him.
Hadis var demek yani.
But this does not change anything on the factuality that these hadiths do exist.
Yok değil.
You cannot claim or make the impression that they wouldn't exist by leading a discussion about them being strong or not strong narrations.
Var.
They do exist.
Mevzu hadis var dedikleri o sonradan konmuş. Peygamber'in sonra çok konan hadisler var, bu İsrail Yahudiler koymuş. Onları hadis alimleri temizledi. Hazreti Buhari.
There are hadiths which did not exist in former times, which were spread and which were attributed to our Prophet, but which were not said by our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, by the opponents of Islam. And all these wrong hadiths, they have been cleaned up by the great narration scholars such as Imam Bukhari or Muslim.
Tirmidhi, hadis alimleri çok var.
Or Tirmidhi, there are many great hadith narration scholars of our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, who have cleaned up these wrong sayings which have been attributed to our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, which are not true and which have been made up by the opponents of Islam.
Onun hepsini temizlediler. Öyle bir Peygamber Efendimiz'in o söylemediği hadisler yok.
And thus they cleaned everything up, and those hadith which have been attributed to our Prophet but which did not exist, which have been made up and which have been manipulated, they have all been cleaned up.
Hepsi var.
And now the hadith that do exist are hadith which do exist.
Şimdi sen kalkıp da bir şey olsun diye milletin itikadını bozmaya ne hakkın var?
You do not have any rights now to start a discussion about something being a strong narration or a weak narration, because this is going to be misunderstood by people, and they are going to assume that these hadiths did not exist, and this then leads to this destruction of their faith, and no one is entitled to manipulate or play around with people's faith just for their own profit.
Zaten bu 3-5 günlük dünyadır.
We live in this world for only just 3 or 5 days.
Fazladan ibadet etseler
What is the harm of people praying, worshipping Allah Almighty?
sana zarar mı olacak?
Is people's worship and people's dedication and devotion to Allah Almighty going to harm you?
İşte bu vaziyet böyledir.
But this is now the situation we find ourselves in.
Aliminden okumuşuna, şeyden okuyanlara, ilahiyat okuyanlar, İmam Hatip okuyanlar, bunlar da yani doğrudan söyleyelim ki dikkat etsinler.
And this is a stern warning to those who study religion, who study in particular Islam, and in Turkey this is known as studying ilahiyat or Imam Hatib. Those who study Islam should pay attention to this.
Başkalarının lafına inanmasınlar. Okuduklarını Allah rızası için okusunlar.
Don't betray your studies and don't betray your knowledge for the sake of what others say. Do not betray your knowledge, your studies for the sake of personal profit, but stay truthful to your faith.
Allah rızası okuyan insan
and do your studies and acquire knowledge for obtaining Allah Almighty's satisfaction.
Allah onun rızkını tekeffül eder.
And those who study for the sake of Allah Almighty will be provided with by Allah Almighty.
Yani başkasının lafına para kazanacağım diye sakın.
As a student of Allah Almighty's knowledge, you do not rely on anyone else's favor when it comes to your worldly outcome.
Ahiretini dünyaya satmayın.
Do not sell your hereafter for the sake of this world.
Ahiret ebedidir.
The hereafter is everlasting.
Dünya göz açıp kapayana kadar gider.
This world will only remain for the blink of an eye.
Çok mühimdir bu çünkü
this is a very important matter.
İnsanlar bunlar alimdir, biz bunlara tabi olalım diye.
Because people easily follow labels, and when they hear about somebody being a scholar, they listen to them.
Çoğu zaman yaptıkları güzel işleri bile yapmıyorlar.
But this may lead to the destruction of people's faith if those so-called scholars are misguided, and then people may even abandon those good things that they were doing because of such wrong ideas.
Vazgeçiyorlar. Allah muhafaza etsin.
May Allah Almighty protect us. May Allah Almighty protect us from these turmoils, from these conflicts, this fitna that is spread in the end of times.
Şeytan dediğiniz gibi en can yerinden vurur. Can yeri de tabi alimlerdir.
Shaitan, the devil, is after fighting, obliterating Islam, and he attacks those who are the source of life for faith, and the source of life of faith are the scholars.
Onun için o alimler dikkat etmesi lazım.
Therefore, those scholars need to be very careful and cautious.
Çok dikkat etmeleri lazım ki
They need to be very careful
onların cezaları daha büyüktür.
because they will be held accountable.
Çünkü cahil, bilmeyen insan tabii herkes öğrenmesi lazım ama hepsini o kadar öğrenemez. Yani
Because they will be held accountable more than those who are not scholars. Not everyone can become a scholar, and not everyone can know everything. Can know everything.
şeyleri öğrenmesi lazım Müslüman.
But as Muslims, we are required to learn about the fundamentals of our religion, of course.
Ama ötekilerini başkaları öğrenen iyi öğrenmesi lazım.
But beyond the fundamentals, there's knowledge which needs to be acquired by the scholars. And those scholars who acquire that profound knowledge need to understand that knowledge very well.
Başkalarına da hidayete vesile olsun diye.
So that they can become the means of guiding people.
Başkalarının yoluna çıkarsa
They are not meant to learn this knowledge to misguide others.
ter çıkardığı adam için de ceza var.
They will be held accountable for every single soul they misguide.
Ne kadar insan onun vesilesiyle hidayete gelirse onun gene ecri o kadardır.
And they will also reap the rewards for every single person who they rightly guide.
Allah muhafaza etsin.
May Allah Almighty protect us
Şeytan şerrinden,
from the evil and malice of shaitan,
ahir zaman fitnelerinden.
from the fitna of the end times.
Allah tawfik ve